The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship with Foyle Legal. For advice tailored to your situation, please consult a qualified legal professional. Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for understanding personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and claim the compensation you deserve.
Ever get that feeling like you're signing a stack of forms at the doctor's office and you have absolutely no idea what you're agreeing to?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I feel about workers' comp sometimes.
Yeah.
It's important, sure, but wading through all the legal jargon to figure out what you're actually entitled to.
Right.
Yeah, not exactly a walk in the park.
No.
But good news, you've come to the right place. We're diving deep into Workers' Compensation Claim Guide, Myths, Facts, and Your Rights. Your cheat sheet to understanding workers' comp in Western Australia.
And you're right to feel that way about the jargon sometimes. It can be a minefield. But at its core, workers' comp is actually designed to be a safety net, not a legal obstacle course.
Oh, safety net, I like that.
Yeah.
So let's untangle this thing, shall we? One myth I hear all the time is workers' comp is just another benefit I have to pay extra for, right?
Definitely not here in Australia. It's one of those things many people assume is optional, but in reality, it's mandatory for employers to provide. Think of it this way. By law, you're automatically covered as an employee.
What a relief to have that off your plate from day one. Imagine the headache of getting hurt on the job and then having to figure out if you're even covered.
Exactly. It's about ensuring workers are protected without adding another financial burden. And that brings us to a principle that underpins the whole system, the no-fault principle.
Now, this is where things get interesting for me. Break it down for us.
The no-fault principle basically means that in most cases, even if you, the worker, made a mistake that led to the injury, you're still entitled to compensation.
Wait, seriously? So even if I, say, tripped over my own 2 left feet carrying a stack of files and twisted my ankle,
Yeah.
I'm still covered.
You got it. Now, of course, there are some exceptions, like if you are under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, the system recognizes that accidents happen, and it aims to support workers regardless of who's at fault. It's about getting you back on your feet, literally.
Now that you mention it, I've definitely heard people say things like, well, I was working from home, so they probably won't cover that. Or carpal tunnel. That's not a real work injury. What's the truth there?
Yeah. More myths, unfortunately. Your location doesn't determine your eligibility. Whether you're at the office, working from home, at a client meeting, or even on a work trip, if the injury happened in the course of your employment, you're likely covered. And carpal tunnel, just like back problems from sitting too long, are very real and often work-related.
So many aha moments already. I'm curious, though, what about part-time workers or folks on temporary contracts? Are they treated differently?
That's a common misconception. In most cases, part-time and temporary employees have the same rights under the workers' compensation system as full-time employees, as long as they meet certain basic criteria, like having worked for a minimum period.
This is all so empowering to know. It feels like there are so many misconceptions out there designed to make people hesitate to claim what they rightfully deserve.
Yeah.
And speaking of hesitations, let's address the elephant in the room, the fear of getting fired for filing a claim.
Yeah.
I imagine that fear can be a huge roadblock for people.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you need support,
Right.
but on the other, you're worried about jeopardizing your job.
It's a completely understandable concern. But the good news is, here in WA, we have a 12-month job protection rule. In a nutshell, your employer is generally required to keep your job open for a year after you become eligible for weekly compensation payments.
Okay.
It's in place to give you that peace of mind.
That's a decent amount of time to focus on recovery without that added pressure.
Right.
But what if, say, after that year, they try to offer you a completely different role, one that your injury might even make difficult?
That's where things can get a bit tricky. Ideally, your employer should offer you a comparable position, similar responsibilities, pay, and conditions. If they genuinely can't, they're supposed to provide suitable alternative employment. Of course, what's considered comparable can sometimes be subjective. That's why documentation is key. If you feel like you're being given a raw deal, That's when getting advice from a workers' comp lawyer can really make a difference.
It sounds like open communication with your employer is important,
Yeah.
but also knowing when to loop in an expert to make sure you're protected.
Exactly.
Now, I'm also curious about the reporting process itself. The guide mentioned something about as soon as practicable.
Right.
What does that actually mean for someone who gets injured on the job?
It's a bit of legal speak, but basically it means you shouldn't delay in reporting the injury to your employer. And it's not enough to just casually mention it. It needs to be in writing. This creates a clear timeline of events, which is crucial if any disputes arise later on about when the injury occurred or what was reported.
So no more trying to tough it out for a week before admitting you need help?
Exactly. It's always better to report sooner rather than later. It protects you and allows you to access appropriate medical care without unnecessary delays.
Makes sense. Speaking of medical care, I was surprised to learn from the guide that seeing your regular doctor might not be enough to support a workers' comp claim.
You're right. It's a common misconception that a note from your GP is all you need. In most cases, you'll need to be assessed by an approved medical specialist, or AMS. These specialists have expertise in work-related injuries and provide a more comprehensive evaluation.
So it's not just about getting a doctor's note saying you can't work. It's about this specialist looking at how your injury directly relates to your job and what you might need to recover.
Precisely. This assessment by the AMS is what determines your degree of whole person impairment, which basically means how much your injury is affecting your ability to function in everyday life, not just at work. This assessment is crucial because it directly impacts what entitlements you're eligible for.
Okay, so that's a term we should probably unpack a bit. Whole person impairment sounds pretty intense.
It sounds scarier than it is. Basically, it takes into account not just your physical injuries, but also any psychological impact the injury might have had. It's about painting a complete picture of how this work-related event has affected your life. And this is really important because it helps determine the level of compensation you might receive, not just for lost wages, but also for things like pain and suffering, and even future care needs.
It's good to know it's not just about a few weeks of missed paychecks. They're looking at the bigger picture. But I have to admit, even with the guide, this is a lot of information to process. What would you say to someone listening who's feeling overwhelmed by all of this?
Honestly, don't be afraid to reach out to a workers' comp lawyer. Think of them like your guide through all of this. They can help you understand your rights, navigate the complexities, and ensure you're not being taken advantage of. It's like having a translator for all that legal jargon we talked about earlier. They can explain things in plain English and help you understand your options.
I love that your workers' comp guide.
There you go.
And when it comes to these complex situations, having someone on your side who speaks the language can be invaluable. Speaking of knowing what you're entitled to, let's talk about those significant changes coming to the WA Workers' Compensation Act. The guide mentions these changes take effect on July 1st, 2024.
These changes are significant and impact various aspects of workers' comp, from how claims are managed to the benefits available.
So much good info in this guide, but I can already hear listeners thinking, okay, this applies to me, but where do I even start with these new laws?
That's a great question. I always say knowledge is power. A good starting point is to familiarize yourself with the key changes outlined in the WA Workers' Compensation Act of 2023. Your guide actually has a whole section dedicated to this.
Right. Don't just let that guide gather dust on a shelf. It's your workers' comp Bible now.
Exactly. And don't hesitate to reach out for clarification. A workers' comp lawyer can break down those changes in a way that makes sense for your individual situation.
It's like having a personal decoder ring for all things workers' comp.
I like that. They can help you navigate those changes and advocate for your rights.
Speaking of advocating for your rights, is there anything else listeners should be doing to prepare for these upcoming changes?
Besides understanding the new legislation, I'd encourage everyone to stay informed about how these changes are being implemented and interpreted. Things might evolve over time, so it's not just a one-time thing to check off your list.
So basically, keep your ear to the ground and don't hesitate to ask questions along the way.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, and staying informed is crucial.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the world of workers' comp, especially here in WA.
It has.
We've tackled those pesky myths, unearthed essential facts, and even gotten a glimpse into the future of the system. Before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners out there? What's the main takeaway you want them to walk away with?
I want everyone listening to remember that their rights as a worker are worth fighting for. Don't let fear, confusion, or misinformation prevent you from seeking the support and compensation you deserve.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Know your rights, ask questions, and don't be afraid to seek guidance when you need it. This deep dive was just the beginning, so keep learning, stay informed, and advocate for yourselves every step of the way. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal. We hope this episode helped clarify your rights and next steps in your injury claim. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and visit foylelegal.com for more useful information. See you next time.